What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of National Pastime. And for the first time in the history of our show, Toaster, we have actual games to talk about. So that's kind of cool. The first full slate of preseason games was this week. And in today's episode, we're going to touch on our first impressions of the rookie class. So that includes your 5 first-round picks, and then some of the other rookies from the later rounds. And then we're going to just in general touch on some of the other quarterback battles that we saw. I think in general, we're not going to get too much into the individual games here. At the end of the day, they're preseason. A lot of, I would say the majority of the games don't matter. But we do have some interesting...
The Detroit Lions went 4-16 that year. They lost every single regular season game. Okay, if you include the preseason, it's important to some people.
It is important to some people. You're right. I won't completely discount it, but for the sake of our conversation, I think we're going to be sticking to the quarterbacks here and what we saw. So to get started, just getting into the rookies here, we had all 5 first-round rookie quarterbacks make their debuts, and just generally first impressions as a whole. We can get into each of these guys individually, but is there anything that stuck out to you kind of evaluating all of them as a whole?
I mean, if we just go in draft order, Lawrence and Zach Fields were the only ones that were truly listed or started off the game as starters.
Zach Wilson.
Yeah, Zach Wilson. Trevor Lawrence, first play of the game, first play of his career, sack fumble. So I think that's what's always hard to evaluate about the quarterback position is we forget that there's 10 other people on the field that are required for you to be successful. And that offensive line is something that he's going to have to work around, not on, because he's not able to do that. So the first thing, pocket just completely collapsed. He didn't stand a chance in hell. Lucky to get the ball back, but good for him that it wasn't a catastrophic start to his career, and he actually ended up getting a first down on that drive. So good for him. But I think that he was probably one of the least impressive of the 5 quarterbacks that were drafted in the first round. What would you say?
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. We should probably start with the caveat, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, mentioning, there's 10 other guys on the field here that ultimately contribute to whether these guys are successful. But in addition, at this point in preseason, a lot of these guys are playing with second, third stringers, competing against second and third stringers. So we'll note that caveat as we sort of discuss all this stuff here. But I would agree. Lawrence didn't really do anything to wow me. He had one really good throw, obviously, down the middle of the defense there. But in general, I thought with all of these first-round guys, we kind of got to see it confirmed my thoughts on a lot of them. I think what we saw some of them do well and not so well were the things that we knew about them as prospects to some degree. Obviously, we're talking about a short period of time from when they got drafted till now. So it's not like anybody made any huge leaps on the mental side of the game or, physically for sure. So, I thought Trevor Lawrence was steady. I thought Mac Jones was steady. I thought, we can kind of get into it more as we go, but I thought Justin Fields was probably the most impressive. Trey Lance had big plays, but also some really bad plays, and something you would expect from a guy that's only played one football game in the last year and hasn't played above the FCS level. So I thought what we saw from these guys was kind of what I was expecting to some degree. But overall, I also was very, pleasantly surprised. Generally, you would see at least one of these guys look just completely lost, right? I mean, it's their first NFL snaps.
I don't think we had a single INT amongst all the rookies, right? And that goes to the coaching staff setting them up well. I can get into the Matt Nagy play calling later. But that was pleasantly surprising. That I think all of the game plans put them in a situation to succeed at this specific point in time, and that's what they ultimately need, so that you don't break them like Sam Darnold got broken, most likely by them just running blitzes at him the entire time in practice, right? That we had
Greg
Williams,
yeah,
just going cover zero blitzes on him all the time. He's just like, this isn't realistic, and he never seemed to recover from that while he was on the Jets. And I think the coaching staff did a great job of keeping all of these guys with their head above water.
Yeah, I would completely agree with you on that. So maybe let's go down the list here. At least with the 5 first-round guys, we'll touch on some of the other guys later as well. But with the 5 first-rounders, you mentioned a little bit, but who was the least impressive to you?
I mean, least impressive, I think you've got to go with McCorkle Jones, because that's kind of his game plan, right? He's Jimmy Garoppolo, whether you want to call him senior or junior. He does what the coaching staff wants. He was 13 of 19 for 87 yards. He took 1 sack, but he took care of the ball. And what I would say is his ball placement was impeccable, and that's what you were looking for with him. And we talked in the last episode that I don't think that he can win the quarterback competition. Cam Newton needs to lose the quarterback competition, but his ball placement, he's putting it low and away, or he's missing high and over the top on long throws, and that's ball security. And Cam Newton on his 3rd play of the game had Chase Young break the left side of the line, and it was ultimately an incompletion, but very easily could have been a fumble. And that's what Mac Jones didn't let happen. Obviously, it wasn't going against Chase Young at the time. But I would ultimately call him the least impressive, but that doesn't mean that he was the least effective.
The worst.
Exactly.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that sort of falls in line exactly with how we evaluated these guys as draft prospects, right? Like Mac was, despite his bonkers numbers at Alabama, the least impressive of all those guys, because he just does the simple things. And I think, you kind of refer to him as Jimmy Garoppolo to some degree. I think Max got a little bit more to his game than Jimmy. I think Mac's ball placement, like you said, I think his anticipation, I think all that stuff, especially for where he's at right now in his career, is pretty special. And while those aren't traits that will jump out at you and maybe win you a game right away, I think that's going to make Mac an effective starter right now. And then maybe he takes a step in another area. Maybe his intermediate passing improves as maybe he, I don't know, works out a little bit and improves on his body and his mechanics. But
once he gets that supermodel wife and works on his own diet, then it'll come there. Every Patriots fan, myself not included, because I do like to consider myself pretty agnostic to things when I'm actually evaluating it. But they're going to give him credit for that deep touchdown pass. That was great coverage. Like he put the ball where it needed to be, but ultimately was not a completion and shouldn't have been a completion. But one thing I do want to point out is he is the only first round quarterback that got to practice the victory formation in his first game. So, I mean, it was at the end of the second quarter, but nobody else took a knee to close out the half.
Okay. Well, you know what? We will note that. And he's probably going to have to get used to that if he continues to play for Bill Belichick. I'll just note that now.
That's probably where most of his rushes will come, considering his athletic ability compared to the other 4 quarterbacks that were drafted ahead of him.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, yeah, I agree with you. Mac wasn't super impressive. It doesn't mean he was bad, but I think kind of give him a TBD grade as of right now. And we'll see as he gets more snaps how this plays out. I don't think he did anything spectacular, despite what Twitter and this goes for every single one of these guys, but every single one of them that made a throw, like a single throw, Twitter went nuts, and everybody was posting the the video and was like, "Oh my God, Trey Lance with this bomb," and
Didn't matter
Trevor
if the
Lawrence with
wide
this throw.
receiver was wide open by 5 yards, right? Like
No,
those, and that's where, again, when I talk about the agnostic approach to these evaluations, those are throws that quarterbacks should make. So
yeah,
Drew Lock had a throw like that. Justin Fields had a throw like that. Trey
hmm
Lance had a throw like that. And I'm not knocking them for it, right? That's still 80
yeah,
yards and a touchdown for Trey Lance, but that's a throw you expect them to make.
yeah,
And when you're drafting people this high, you want them to make the throws that are unexpected or not league average, more
yeah,
or less, right?
totally. Yep.
What I will say real quick about Jones is that kind of has tipped me in his favor in the quarterback competition is he's hitting those screen throws in stride, and that is a huge part of that Patriots offense. And one of the biggest things that Cam Newton was not able to do last year, and I didn't see improvement in it in that first preseason game. So that might be another thing to tip McCorkle over Newton to start off the season. I don't think it's going to go week one, but
Right.
could be soon thereafter.
Yeah. And Mac was great at that at Alabama too.
Right.
I mean, a lot of the yak gets attributed to the speed of Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle and Najee Harris to some degree as well. But I mean, Mac's ability to get the ball on time where it needs to be, and not just, we're not just talking general accuracy here, but the ball placement to give somebody room to run is what he was known for. So, yeah, not surprising that showed up as well. As far as I'm going to go down, I guess, to the guy who is next on my least impressed me list here, but Trevor Lawrence. He was 6 of 9, 71 yards. He had one really nice throw. Overall, I didn't see anything that jumped out to me. Like, if I hadn't known Trevor Lawrence was who he is, there's no way I would have watched that game and thought this guy is a generational.
This is Gardner Minshew, right?
Yeah.
Like, you would have thought that. And I think part of that was play design, though. They did not utilize his skills, at least from a running ability, in any way whatsoever. They kept him in the pocket. And we can get into it later, but a lot of these long touchdowns taken 4 or 5 seconds to develop these plays, and they didn't let Trevor Lawrence develop that amount of time. And maybe it's because they don't trust the line. Maybe it's because they know that he can do that and they don't want to force that yet. But that's what I think the difference was between being spectacular and being unspectacular for these rookie quarterbacks, was being able to generate that extra time in the pocket and make those not broken plays, but extend the plays to get extra open receivers.
Yeah. And Trevor, like Mac, and to some degree, all of these guys, it's a situation where he threw the ball 9 times. Okay. He completed six passes. A lot of them were short. I don't think we're not making any sweeping judgments about who he is off of this one appearance. But as far as first impressions here went, I expected, I think, to see a little bit more from him. I thought maybe they would challenge him a little bit more with more throws down the field. Like you said, get him out on the run, show off his athleticism. And they didn't really do that. And I'm not exactly sure why. I think we all know Trevor Lawrence is going to be probably just fine. This game is just whatever. But if he is your presumed starter, even though Urban won't admit that, I would have liked to have seen him do a little bit more within the offense, even if it is just one preseason game, because you only get 3 of them.
Right.
So
what I did see out of him that I didn't see out of who I'd put next on my list of least impressive is he actually got to go through his reads and progressions. So he was 6 of 9, but that wasn't his first look on all 6 of his pass completions. Whereas Zach Wilson, all of his passes were to his first read or on design runouts that gave him the opportunity to find an open receiver that he was staring at the entire time. He stared down Corey Davis on all 4 of his first series throws. That was the only place he was looking. And yes, Corey Davis was able to get open on 2 of them, but there was no, it's kind of like designing your first 15 plays, right? but he designed the first 15 plays and he didn't have to take a second read on his first 15 plays. He knew where he was going and he was going to go there regardless. The one time that he did have to go to his second and third progression, he threw into the middle of the field on a slant that was double covered. And those are the dangerous throws that he needs to avoid.
Yeah, I think it's hard for me to pass too much judgment there just because you don't really know what these guys are being asked to do in these scenarios. And I think you've made a good point in saying that these coaching staffs as a whole, I think, protected them very well and put them all in positions to succeed to some degree. And it might be a situation where they were like, Zach, we want to see you get the ball out quick and get, not necessarily telegraph your throw, right? But this is where you're going with the ball, and just getting the play call in, communicating it in the huddle, things that he didn't do at BYU. He obviously missed a couple of days of camp as well, as we talked about before. So maybe that's still something that they're working on with him. And I agree with you. I would slot him in this spot on those 5 as well. Like Trevor Lawrence, 6 of 9, only 63 yards, didn't really push the ball down the field all that much at all. I don't recall a single throw that went over like 15 yards necessarily.
Yeah. What I'm going to be concerned about with him is when he does get that Elijah Moore back and he's waiting 4 seconds for him to create that separation on those deep routes, that he's just sitting there staring down Elijah Moore. And then if he doesn't find a way to get open, he's got no secondary fallback plan. So I appreciate what you're saying, though, that there's so many more aspects to this job, like anybody's job, right? Everybody's like, oh, you do this. And it's like, well, I do that, but I also do these 15 other things on a daily basis that are so mundane at this point that we don't recognize, right? Yeah. Commanding the huddle, getting everybody lined up correctly, making sure that you're set for 1 second before you hike the ball. Like there's all these little checklist things that they could be knocking out with Zach Wilson right now that they weren't even focused on. We know you can throw the ball.
Yeah. And I think with him, as far as these guys all meeting my expectations of them, with him, I expected a little bit more down the field. Maybe expected him to roll out and let a play develop and see if something would open up. Because that's kind of like what he was at BYU to some degree when he wasn't, camping out back there in the pocket with all day to throw behind their O-line. But, he was a guy that took his shots and showed off that arm talent. That's what makes him special. That's why they took him number 2 overall. I didn't really see a ton of that. And
well, I think a lot of this was prescribed, and I don't want to call myself correct on this, even though I was. But I mean, on the first drive, it was 7 run, 4 pass, right? And what we said was we can't break Zach Wilson right now, and that we identified him as the biggest risk for that. So 7 runs,
they ran the ball effectively.
Yeah, exactly. 7 runs, 4 passes on the first drive, 5 runs, 5 passes on the second drive. He had a 12-play drive and he had a 10-play drive. Like they moved the ball effectively. And when they got pinned at I believe it was their 2-yard line off of a terrible punt return decision, they made the right call and didn't let him go out there and have to take that, risk of potentially breaking him.
Yeah. Getting hit in the end zone, safety, making a bad decision. They did the right thing with him. And he, like you mentioned off the top, is like Trevor Lawrence, really the only one of these guys that is a for sure week 1 starter. So I don't think they're necessarily looking for him to show them something right now. I think that it's all a process for Zach. He's probably going to get a little more run in the second preseason game. Doubt he plays in the third. I'm not really sure what.
So you're ruling out Mike White and James Morgan in the quarterback competition for him? Officially?
I'm gonna have to, and not that Zach was all that impressive, but Mike White and James Morgan aren't necessarily pushing him. I don't believe. I could be wrong.
Still shocking to me that they haven't added a veteran quarterback just for the knowledge transfer, right? Like you are here. Yeah. I mean, I can't even remember his name. Who was the quarterback for the Texans last year that was their 4th QB that wasn't even at practice? He was just there virtually.
Oh,
God,
I don't know.
Josh McCown. Josh McCown. That's
Oh,
who it
Josh
was.
McCown.
Like,
Yeah,
why don't
yeah.
you just fucking give Josh McCown $750,000 to just say, hey, this is what the quarterback position entails, because Mike White and James Morgan are not going to be able to do that.
No, even just to hop on a Zoom call during like film meetings and just say like, hey, what did you see here? This is what you should be doing. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I'm still holding out hope that the Bears are dangling Nick Foles out there and something will happen. But I think the biggest piece there, anyways, Nick Foles doesn't want to go to New York to back up Zach Wilson, and he's pretty firm in that. Not that he has a no trade clause, but he's just a team's not going to trade for a guy that doesn't want to be there necessarily.
Yeah,
so
we'll probably talk about Texans later, but man, to go from Josh McCown as your QB4 to Deshaun Watson as your QB4, I mean, I don't know who their QB 1, 2, and 3 are, but shit, they must have had a hell of a season.
Yeah, they really beefed up their quarterback room in the offseason for sure.
But anyways, who do you
right.
go to next? Is it Lance or Fields is the most impressive?
So at the risk of coming across as a homer here, Trey Lance was second for me. So Lance had obviously that bomb. We talked about it already. I think it traveled in the neighborhood of 50 yards in the air. The guy had separation. It was a great throw, regardless of the separation. It was a great throw, good play design. And, that I think led to, obviously he had 128 yards at 80 came on that one play. He was 5 of 14. There were a couple drops. I think what I saw with Lance that I didn't see with Fields is Lance seemed to, there was twice that I recall that Lance really put a ball like on a defender, like should have been intercepted. One may have been a little tough, but 2 times he threw a ball like basically right at a guy. And what I saw with Lance was just that inexperience still. And not that he looked rattled per se, but when that first option wasn't available to him, I didn't see him necessarily making plays the way that Justin Fields did and rolling out of the pocket, staying calm, keeping his eyes downfield. Like I said, he had 2 throws that sort of seemed like panic throws to me and could have been intercepted. All in all, I thought he looked very good though. I mean, like he throws a fucking amazing ball. And he was right on the money with a lot of their concepts, like right on time. And I think he looks like the guy to me for San Francisco. He didn't look rattled to the point where I would be worried about him. Now, again, the caveat, we're facing bland defenses, facing second, third stringers, all that stuff aside.
Slow defenses in Justin Fields' term, right?
Yeah, slow defenses. But Trey also got to play with a lot of starters, which is something that I think a lot of these guys didn't necessarily get the opportunity to. Trey Sermon played a lot with him. Their announcer kept referring to it as the Trey package. And, his first ball was to Brandon Ayuk.
Ironic that there's only 2 people in the Trey package, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. His first ball was to Brandon Ayuk, who, he dropped it. But
that was an absolute fucking bullet. Like, I can't imagine having a better first pass in my career. Mostly because I can't throw the ball like that in general. But should I be able to, for Ayuk to just drop that, and that's going to be a concern for him. I was ready to anoint Lance as the winner of this initial quarterback competition because it was ironic in that he came out hot, right? He's only 5 of 14. You didn't feel that way because he was putting the ball on receivers. Yeah. And like you said, there are 2 or 3 drops that are in there. Obviously, I'm not going to omit the 80-yard pass to Sherfield in your fantasy leagues. Maybe consider Sherfield because it kind of looks like he's on the Tyreek Hill or the Quentin, what's his name, Watson, for the Eagles kind of trek right now. But what concerns me about him is the touch, and he throws the hell out of the ball. He puts that on the receivers. He can do it in the screen game We saw it a couple times, but those 5-yard curls, the 10-yard ends, he's throwing bullets out there. And the risk there is those are tip balls, right? If you put it on your receiver too hot, those become interceptions.
I think he was just too amped. Do you think that was part of it?
I think that's definitely part of it, right? You want to get the ball out quick. You want to get to your receivers as soon as possible. When you see that window's open, you want to hit that open window. But there's got to be a recognition that people, I mean, I remember the receivers talking about Brett Favre, right? Where their hands actually hurt after catching his passes. And it's like, yeah, that's partially why he was one of the interception kings, along with the fact that he liked to free Lance a lot. But what I would ultimately take out of this is that 49ers are going to be pretty damn good. The difference between Garoppolo and Lance is when you have Garoppolo has to get the ball into the playmaker's hands.
Yeah.
When Lance is your quarterback, the ball starts in your playmaker's hands. And as long as he can not throw interceptions, not fumble. He did ultimately have one fumble on 4 sacks, and that's going to be concerning for them long term, and why I think Garoppolo is still in the driver's seat at this point. But he's got tremendous talent, and he just needs to rein that in and figure out how he hits those short intermediate passes with some touch, and still being confident. But the fact that after that first Ayuk drop and a couple of other long passes that weren't ultimately completed, he kept his head up and kept running. It was fantastic. But the difference between him and Fields was that he was hot off the start and Fields progressed, right? Like you could see the development, the learning. You can say that it was
in real time.
The defense was getting less and less effective because they were subbing out, their starters. But he went from 3 and out on his first 3 drives to I think he ended up with 12 of 14 for 130 some odd yards and a touchdown, as well as a rushing touchdown after his first 3 drives. That was what was impressive about Fields over Lance.
Yeah. Fields definitely was lights out. I'll close out my thought on Lance. One thing that we didn't see from him, which you mentioned makes him special, is him running the ball, and that's definitely something that, whether he's the starter or not, Kyle Shanahan is going to use him for. And I think in a regular season setting, we might see Shanahan run him a little bit more than we got to see this time around, and that might help negate some of he, like you said, he took 4 sacks, and those aren't all on him, but sacks are, as we learn more and more about this thing, becoming a quarterback statistic, because you have the ability to get rid of the ball and can control that element of it. But
just to finish on that, there was one screen pass that he threw where there wasn't a defender within 7 yards of the wide receiver, because all three linebackers were concerned about where the fuck he was on the field.
Yeah.
So to be able to get 7 yards of separation on a screen pass, that's unheard of. And that's basically a punt return at that point, right? You're diving forward for 10 yards.
Yeah. And Kyle Shanahan is going to dial those things up. He's going to get man advantages from a blocking standpoint. And I think I agree with you. I think the 49ers are going to be pretty good, especially if Trey Lance can build off of what he did going forward here.
Yep.
So I guess switching over to Justin Fields, you mentioned his slow start. The Bears went 3 and out on their first 5 possessions of this game, which was maddening if you're a Bears fan, and watching some of Matt Nagy's play calls there, it felt a lot like last year to some degree.
Did you feel like the play calls were contrived? I feel like they tried to get every single poor situation Justin Fields could be in his first 3 drives, because they had the batted ball, they had the poor snap, they had the run out to the side where he spin moved and fumbled. There was every single situation, false starts, holding, that you would say, okay, these are the things you have to overcome. Maybe it was genius on Nagy's part to throw all of that in there. He just said, hey, 69, you're holding. right now.
Yeah.
Because the first 5 drives and the rest of the game were night and day.
Yeah, you could see. So, like their first drive, there was 2 penalties on offensive linemen. Worth noting that not only was Justin Fields playing with backups, but the Bears are like just decimated on the offensive line right now from an injury standpoint. So they're just like picking dudes off the street. 39-year-old Jason Peters being one of them, just got signed after the game actually. But yeah, getting backed up initially the way he was, that was definitely a tough situation to be put in. The spin, the rollout, the run that he fumbled, ultimately recovered his fumble on. He was asked about it after the game and joked that he's going to retire the spin move. And yeah, I mean, there were a couple throws that, defense made some good plays, but then that last drive before the half, even amidst all that stuff, I think one of the things that you saw from him right away in this game was he is not going to be rattled. He's poised no matter what. And you made the joke about his comment, of the game looking slow. He looked like he was playing very slow for a lot of the game and really just waiting for plays to happen. And I thought that last drive before the half where he put them in a position to kick a field goal was really what got him going. Even though there was only 40 seconds, he didn't really have time to do a whole lot. But he hits that 8-yard pass to Jesse James, sets up the 53-yarder. They go into the half scoring. They get the ball coming out of the half. And then, yeah, he was lights out in the second half, third quarter of the game. I was pretty impressed by him. The touchdown was, it was what it is. It was a wide open throw. It was actually the same play design from the college football, the semis against Clemson. It was a throwback play that they ran. So Matt Nagy hitting up his buddy Ryan Day, I guess, for some inspiration there. But I just thought he looked in control the whole time. And he had a couple of nice runs where you realize like, oh shit, this dude's like, yeah, he's legit 4-4.
He runs a 4-4. Yeah.
Yeah. But and again, to my point of these guys kind of doing all what we expected them to do to some degree, that's what he was at Ohio State. Like, he has the ability to do that, but he doesn't look to do that. Even when he broke the pocket a lot of times, his head was up. He wasn't sprinting, to the line of scrimmage. He was, keeping his head up. He was continuing to move, but he just has like such a calm about him, and his ability to, he showed the arm off a couple times with some pretty decent throws, not in the same way that Trey Lance did necessarily, but I just thought overall, I know me as a Bears fan, I was pleased with what I saw, and I think it puts him another step forward as far as the quarterback competition with Andy Dalton. And I think Matt Nagy's probably going to have some things to think about today.
I think he put everything on tape that he needs to work on today. And that's a big move for him. We already talked about the fact that they were probably 5-6 plays in those first 9 plays that he had that were unscripted, didn't put him in a position to succeed. But the other thing that I saw is he had 3 or 4 throws that he did not step into his throw. He was throwing it off his back foot, and 2 of them were under throws, and 1 resulted in a beautiful contested catch. But that is a learning opportunity for him. And that's what Cam Newton's doing right now. And you're relying on your arm strength, and you can't do that at this level. You've got to be able to step in, drive those throws, and 2 of those were, like I said, underthrown, potential, not interceptions, but possible. You don't know what's going to happen. But to put that on tape right now, I think is beautiful for him. I don't think that ultimately Andy Dalton did anything to lose his job today, week 1.
Threw the ball 4 times.
But after watching what Fields did today, and my previous statement again on him not being rattled by getting absolutely rocked by the Rams, he showed that today, that you can throw him in week 1 and say, this is our future, and maybe we can get more for Andy Dalton than we can for Nick Foles in a trade.
Yeah, and it depending on what ends up happening here with some of these other teams, Dalton would be a very good get for a team that is in a tough position with either a quarterback injury, especially really late in the training camp, or in preseason, just because he's a vet who could step in. He's been around the league long enough. He knows basic terminology. It wouldn't take him long to get up to speed, basically. And if there's an opportunity to start and he's not going to get it in Chicago, I think the Bears would accommodate him and move him along.
Maybe back to Dallas. Who knows at this point?
Oh, yeah. I don't know what's going on with Dak there. That might be another topic all on its own. But yeah, overall, I was honestly I thought all these guys did great for what the situations were. We pointed out a handful of performances that weren't all that exciting per se, but all these guys looked the part to me on some level. Now, that can't necessarily be said for some of the later round picks we're going to get into here. Is there anyone you want to start off with?
I'm throwing this at you because we didn't even discuss him because he wasn't drafted in the same round as the rest of the quarterbacks. But the Kyle Trask pick looks absolutely awful at this point. He was fourth on the depth chart. And I actually didn't even care to pull up his stats at this point, but I think he was something along the lines of 5 for 14 for 40-ish yards.
5 for 15 for 35 yards.
Yeah. So what this means to me is
4 or 15. Sorry.
Bruce Arians is that risk it or biscuit, right? That's his freaking go-to tagline. He's also had Ben Roethlisberger, Andrew Luck, Carson Palmer, and Tom Brady, and Justin and Jameis Winston as his quarterbacks. That's all. Those are the only quarterbacks he's ever coached. So 4 first-round draft picks, and then I guess maybe like a 6th round that fell to somebody. But at the same time, who were they throwing to? Hines Ward, Santonio Holmes, Antonio Brown. So the worst setup that he's ever had. He's always had a first-round draft pick throwing to a first-round wide receiver, other than 2 years in Pittsburgh when Roethlisberger was throwing to Antonio Brown. It's been Andrew Luck and Reggie Wayne, Carson Palmer and Larry Fitzgerald, Tom Brady, Mike Evans. So this risk it or biscuit, yeah. And they said they drafted Kyle Trask because he fit that push downfield persona, and he did throw the ball downfield, but it's a risk it or biscuit. And unless you have 2 elite players on each end of that risk it, then there's no biscuit. And that's what I saw out of him today. How you can go, he looked absolutely lost because he was just trying to throw the hell out of the ball. And it was a wasted draft pick in my mind, and a waste for Tom Brady's remaining 2 years.
Well, and I don't understand. I think we talked about this after the draft, how you can look at Kyle Trask's tape and think that he's a guy that is, a big arm that's going to push the ball down the field. He's a big body. He looks like he should be able to do that. I never saw him throw the ball down the field, with any sort of velocity while he was at Florida. Frankly, I never saw him throw the ball further than 15 yards all that effectively most of the time.
And he's also throwing to Kyle Pitts and Kadarius Toney at the time. Yeah.
So I think I agree with you. That was a terrible draft pick. And unless I'm not, going to write him off fully after one game and all this stuff, but ultimately what we saw with a lot of these other guys, even though they were in, I don't know, some of them got to play with starters, obviously, but a lot of them got to play with backups against backups. That was Kyle Trask's situation too. And it's not like he was playing against the starters and that, makes his line look worse or anything like that. He just straight up looked bad. And this is a guy that was maybe, I don't know if there's any truth to this, but at the time, people were talking about as potentially being a 6th guy drafted in the first round.
Yeah.
So
I never saw that out of
luck.
him. And I mean, Ryan Griffin, 8 years in the league, got to throw 2 interceptions in a preseason game before Kyle Trask even got to enter. So there's just a huge disconnect with where Kyle Trask was drafted and where he's at in his development right now, because honestly, Mills looked pretty damn good. Monde looked decent, I would say. He's also only practiced for 3 days because he was on the COVID list through Thursday.
That's true.
So
I'll give you that. Well, maybe let's transition there. So you mentioned Davis Mills. Tyro Taylor got the start. He was 4-4 for 40 yards to start the game. Looked like he knows what he's doing.
He had every single throw was on point. This dude has had the worst luck in his career because he's going to lose his job to another rookie draft pick. And it's nothing to do with himself. I mean, he took the fucking Bills to the playoffs for the first time in 15, 20 years. And he just keeps getting this poor luck where now Davis Mills did just enough. I was actually optimistic for Tyrod because the Mills's first practice was reportedly so bad that it was said to not even be a professional level practice. Like they had never seen a professional quarterback perform as poorly as Davis Mills has. And now he went, basically 50% for 112 yards passing. He didn't do anything egregious. So why not see what you have? Because apparently your QB4 is not going to be on your roster beyond this year, the next year. And you need to figure out if you're drafting another perennial quarterback or you have something in Davis Mills, because I don't think Tyrod Taylor is going to stick around to be your franchise quarterback.
No, Mills showed, I think, what he is, right? He had some really nice throws. I think there was a throw to the end zone that was like a beautiful throw. It was incomplete, but he gave his guy a shot.
It was great ball placement. His receiver had an opportunity to score a touchdown, and the defenders didn't have any opportunity to really defend it or intercept it, obviously.
Right. It would have been a great play, but, you expect guys to make that. And he also, only completed 50% of his passes. He threw an interception. So there's inconsistencies there. This is also a guy that hardly started any games because of injuries in college as well. So he does need reps. To your point with Tyrod, if you're the Texans here, there is zero incentive to play Tyrod Taylor. And we had this conversation offline, but play Tyrod Taylor and win 4 or 5 games, right? Like play Davis Mills, let him take his lumps if necessary, and get the first overall pick. And you see what you have in Davis Mills. Maybe he looks okay. And you don't need to go draft Spencer Rattler with the first pick, or you could trade down or something. You know what I mean? But playing Tyrod Taylor, unfortunately for him, doesn't do much. You're almost better off playing Davis Mills regardless of how he looks.
Right. And it's unfortunate for Tyrod, but the only thing you're guaranteed in your contract is essentially your pay and nothing else beyond that. So they'll give him his millions, but that doesn't mean that he has to be the starter, because that's probably not the long-term answer for them. The only reason that they give him the nod right now is to say Davis Mills will be more harm than good to himself by starting this early.
Yeah, and that's probably a fair assessment. Transitioning here to Kellen Monde. You said you thought he looked okay. I do think the caveat of his only having practiced a few games is worth calling out. I thought he looked bad. And when you contrast what he did with what some of these other guys did, just on a first impression here, this was a guy that famously Chris Sims had as his number 4 quarterback ahead of Justin Fields in this class. I don't think Kellen Monde is that guy. I don't think he's 6 of 16 for 53 yards in a preseason game bad, but he just doesn't do anything for me that is exceptional. Even his running ability, he had 25 rushing yards. He had a couple good runs. That wasn't really what he was known for at Texas A&M. He's a good athlete, not necessarily a dynamic runner. And he's not a guy that pushes the ball down the field. And I just think, I'm not saying it's a wasted draft pick. It was a 3rd round pick. And, you have Kirk Cousins, who knows when you'll be moving on from him. So it's worth a shot. But all things considered, between not getting vaccinated, getting COVID, infecting the starting quarterback and the rest of the quarterback room, and this performance, I think it's been it's been a rough couple weeks for Kellen Monde, to say the least.
100%. What I would hold out hope for in Kellen Monde is, again, that ability to extend time in the pocket, and he gives you that over the Kyle Trasks.
Yeah, he does.
And then this might have been a juxtaposition against Jake Browning as well, because he was 5 for 10 for 31 yards with an interception. That interception meant that only 2 pass catchers actually caught the ball. First round pass catchers caught the ball. It was 1 catch from fucked it up anyways. Jalen Waddle on his punt return, which we should get into because that's fucking stupid that he's taking it. But Surtain, that was a beautiful pass to Surtain for the pick 6. So he did throw a touchdown pass. But watching Jake,
player.
Yeah,
okay,
watching Jake Browning versus Kellen Monde, I think that was the difference for me, that their future is much brighter, obviously, with Kellen Monde than Browning. And again, he's been in the quarterback room for 3 days now because of his COVID things. Obviously, Mike Zimmer's not super happy about that, but I don't think he's super happy with his entire quarterback room out of that.
Yeah, I want to make note of this quote from Zimmer, though. Well, sorry, not so much Zimmer's quote, but Mond's response. Mike Zimmer made a comment saying that he wanted Kellen to be more vocal. Kellen says, quote, "I don't necessarily know what he means by that on my personality. I thought I did a good job in the huddle and getting certain guys going." Zimmer is just pulling 0 punches this preseason. I don't know if he's being extra hard on Monde because of the COVID situation and the fact that Monde still isn't vaccinated and could potentially hurt them later on as well.
Considering Kirk Cousins is also still not vaccinated.
And probably will not be getting vaccinated.
No.
So, Zimmer is just pulling no punches when it comes to this stuff with his quarterbacks. And that's tough for Kellen Monde. That's tough for a rookie, I think, to hear from your head coach, to be honest.
No, I would agree. But we've made the COVID stance pretty clear that it's a team risk, and you are more of a detriment than a benefit, especially if you're not a starter, right? And this is where it's going to be interesting to see how the vaccination rates change once the 90-man roster is cut down to 53, because I think we've seen multiple reports where there's 7-8 people on the roster that are not going to get vaccinated, but they're also uncuttable. And so 7 of 8 of 53 is a very different percentage than 7 or 8 of 90.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we don't have to keep going on the COVID stuff, like you said. But I think any final thoughts on these rookies, these 8 guys? Is there anything else that you wanted to get in before we move on here?
I would give Lawrence the nod over Minshew in the quarterback battle. I mean, he had 1 sack and interception on Minshew. It was at the end of the half, but he also had an overthrow that should have been an interception. So why they're still playing this off as an opportunity for him, I guess maybe it's the same reason they're playing it off as an opportunity for Tim Tebow to be a starting tight end on their team.
Did you see that block, by the way?
As a pancake.
I'm gonna I'll put that in quotes, that block.
It was effective. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt. The job was completed out of it.
Sure.
But he looks lumbering out of his breaks. It is like watching a left fielder take off after a fly ball. It is not impressive whatsoever. And he's going to retire before he gets cut in the next couple
You
weeks.
think so?
Yeah.
I think that's probably a very good call, actually. Yeah. All right. Well, we we'll transition, I guess, from the rookies and get to some other quarterback competitions here real quick before we go. Staying within that Minnesota game, Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater. My first thoughts watching these guys, it's that these guys are exactly who they are. Drew Lock, took some deep shots. He obviously had some wide open throws, which helps a lot, but took his deep shots. And Teddy Bridgewater was steady Teddy, 7 of 8, 74 yards, 9.3 yards, per attempt, like a touchdown. They both put up numbers, and I don't know if Vic Fangio got any clarity on who he should be starting, but of course these guys went out and did this, right?
I'd give the nod to Bridgewater, honestly. Like, it was wiped away by a penalty, but he also had a 12-yard rush for a touchdown on his first drive that ultimately led to a field goal. But they were 2nd and 17 at that point, and clearly just in ball control mode, which has nothing to do with Teddy. And like you said, 7 of 8, steady Teddy, had a great drive. The biggest outcome to me out of this game was Javonte Williams is gonna be a stud.
Yeah, if you are putting together your fantasy rankings, he's definitely a guy to keep an eye on, and sort of that second or third wave of running backs. I think he's
another reason not to give a second contract to an AKA Melvin Gordon, because these people are replaceable. But it'll be fun to see which UNC back ends up with better stats, because Michael Carter also looked pretty dang good for the Jets. But I think that Broncos offense is going to give Javonte Williams the leg up on that one. The other quarterback competition I think we need to hit on, Hill versus Winston.
Mm-hmm.
Both had an interception. The biggest takeaway for me was that Hill actually looked like a quarterback. Like, he was dropping back, hitting throws. He looked more comfortable in the pocket than Jameis Winston does. Jameis Winston was dancing like his freaking workout videos, where he takes his 5-step drop and then he takes another 17 steps while he's waiting to make his throw. Yeah. And a lot of the throws were off the mark and in dangerous areas. What we talked about with McCorkle Jones missing low and away.
Mm-hmm.
Winston's throwing high and behind, and that's where your defenders are. And while they both had an interception, Hill's interception was a miscommunication between him and a 4th, 5th string wide receiver in Ty Montgomery. He did have another one that probably should have been picked, but Winston's was an underthrow, and again, a lot of poor ball positioning out of Winston. So I'd give the nod to Hill out of this one.
Yeah. I still just don't know. I guess ultimately it's going to come down to what Sean Payton values more here. Taysom Hill, to your point, is going to be, he looked more like a quarterback. I think than I guess he has in the past, which isn't saying a whole lot, but he's going to be more conservative. You're going to be able to run the ball with him too, and use him as a weapon that way. And, there's value in that. Obviously, we saw them for years now, the last few years with Drew Brees, not really throw the ball down the field and still be really effective as an offense. But if Jameis can figure it out, which is a big if, his ability to push the ball down the field and make big plays can really unlock stuff for your offense. And I know he, threw an interception because, of course, he's Jameis Winston. If you can coach enough of that stuff out of him, I don't know. I don't think Taysom Hill did enough to show me that he should still be starting over Jameis with the upside that Jameis provides. But Jameis didn't do himself any favors in this game, that's for sure. And I think,
he's setting himself up to star in a 30 for 30 ESPN someday again. But no, it's the footwork for me that's the biggest issue. Dancing around that pocket, not being set. It reminds me of those joggers at frickin' stoplights that are acting like their heart rate's going to drop to 0 if they take 1 second away from pumping their legs. And speaking of footwork, I think Tua was another one to me that was surprising, that he was not stepping into his throws. He went 8 for 11, had almost 100 yards passing, but an egregious red zone interception. And that's what's going to take the Dolphins down and may lead to a Mac Jones, Jacoby Brissett face-off week 18 to see who actually makes it to the playoffs.
Yeah, the Bears front seven is very good. Their starting front seven is very good, and they've I've been following the joint practices leading up to the game, and they've pretty much been manhandling the Dolphins O-line all week. But the second that any pressure was up in his face, he was bailing on throws. I mean, Tua looked really, he had a couple nice throws into some tight windows, but as a whole, I thought Tua looked really bad.
His ball placement was better for sure.
Yeah. But you want a guy that's in his second year in the offense where he said, I feel more confident in what I'm doing in this offense now. I think you'd like to see him operate with a little more poise, a la Justin Fields, than we saw from Tua in this game. I was very, very surprised to see how bad he looked, especially with the Bears not playing a lot of their starters on the back end of that defense. Tua probably should have had a much better game than he did. And that interception, like you pointed out, was very bad.
Well, that red zone interception came on 1st and 10, which is, again, inexcusable, and the cleanest pocket he probably had the entire time. That was a beautiful pocket. He stepped up, he stared down his tight end, because that seems to be the only receiver that he's able to stare down as tight ends right now. Even the Gesicki throw for 50 yards, it went for 50 yards, but it was a little underthrown, and quite frankly, the separation wasn't there when he chose to make the pass, which made that a dangerous play. It worked out ultimately, and God knows that 80% of the time, that's all it needs, right? Is that, okay, there was a chance and it worked out for the better rather than for the worse. But Ogletree, had he not stopped his feet, which he hadn't at the time that he made that throw, would have been easily there to break up that pass or potentially do worse. So I was disappointed by him. My biggest surprise was actually in Jalen Hurts. 3 of 7, but that's not what the numbers do not reflect how well he actually played. So let's keep an eye on him, because he hit multiple receivers. And then
I don't know if you saw this, Toaster, but Joe Flacco threw a screen pass that went for a touchdown, and people are calling for him to be QB1. So just saying.
I mean, Hurts did miss the same wide receiver on a potential 98-yard passing touchdown. So I can understand that. He's, again, the Tyreek Hill type of breakaway speed. If you can get enough time, throw it up and let him run under it. To Flacco's point, throw him on a screen pass, have one cornerback take a bad angle, and that's all you need. It was good to see that juxtaposition, because everybody wants a quarterback battle.
That's right.
But from what I saw, Hurts definitely commanded the ball well enough he showed considerable improvement over last year.
I thought he looked good. He looked confident, and off the, when he was on the sideline, and even when when the defense was in, but 2, when Joe Flacco was in and he was out of the game at that point, just seeing him interact with his teammates, he looks like a guy that is a leader in that locker room. And you don't just do that by being a nice guy. I think you have to have your teammates have to believe in you to some degree as well. And I think they do with him. He has flaws. He's not super accurate. His ball placement isn't great, but he's obviously very talented. You don't put up the numbers that he put up in college without being talented. And he's obviously a weapon as a runner. So yeah, I thought to your point, the numbers didn't really tell the story with him. I thought he looked pretty good too. So that was a good call out.
Yeah. It's exciting to see him potentially succeed. Jordan Love would be on the opposite side, where I think his numbers made him look better than he ultimately was. There were a couple passes where Devin Funchess, I'm pretty sure he was on the sideline with Aaron Rodgers, talking about like, hey, if you were actually throwing this ball, then this would have gone for 10 more yards, because I wouldn't have had to dive across the middle of the fucking field to try to make the grab. His passes were described as errant, and I think that his receivers bailed him out quite a few times. So he's got some development to do, and I think Green Bay Packers right now might be a little bit nervous about what they're looking at next year.
Well, they're going to, from a PR standpoint, they're going to pump the overall numbers, right? 12 of 17 for 122 looks good. A good chunk of that was on a screen pass. Yep. And another large chunk of that was on a single play, which admittedly was a good throw.
It was a good throw. It was a little behind Sternberger, but like he did feed it over a linebacker. But yeah, another big chunk play. But if you look at the other passes on that drive, he was missing high, missing low. It wasn't impressive.
He was errant, or he was throwing at the line of scrimmage, and who knows, what they were calling, like how complex the offense was for him in this game. But I agree with you. I didn't see anything from him that would lead me to believe that the Packers are in a good place if Aaron Rodgers moves on. And honestly, he probably has next week to get these reps in. Maybe he plays in the third preseason game. I don't know. But the second the regular season starts, all these reps are gone. His ability to practice like with physical reps is gone. He'll be able to learn, but he also got to sit and learn all last year too. And we've seen how that's played out for him so far. So they're in a tough position. And I honestly don't know if they want to expose him more, because I mean, potentially he's trade fodder. I don't know, at some point. And if you put too much bad stuff on tape, that definitely goes away. So I'm with you on Jordan Love as well. That was going to be my call out. I thought his overall numbers look great, but his performance left a little to be desired for sure.
Yeah, that was the winner of that was definitely Devin Funchess, because former first round draft pick, hopping around quite a few teams and then having a couple good snags because he had to, because his quarterback couldn't actually hit him in the chest. The last thing I want to call out is the Las Vegas Raiders line. Holy shit. Nathan Peterman got the start, and this is a guy that actually averages one interception every 48 passing yards. So going for nearly 250 with only one interception was quite a step up. And actually, he looked pretty damn good. I don't want to belittle what he was able to pull off. But this is just John Gruden's wet dream to be able to start Nathan Peterman in a game. I know that Mariota's a little bit banged up and they weren't going to play Carr, but this was him trying to F you to the world that Nathan Peterman can get beyond that 5 interception performance that he had for the Bills. Yeah.
Yeah. I can hear Gruden going, "That's my guy, man. That's my guy, man." Yeah. He loves him some Nathan Peterman.
But that O-line, they opened up a couple rushing lanes, but it's going to be rough for Carr with that completely revamped offensive line. And by revamped, I just mean replaced, not necessarily improved.
Yeah. It's going to be a rough go for the Raiders this year, I think, just as a whole. We've talked, ad nauseum that's a rough division, but their first showing in a live game definitely didn't make you think that, maybe the Raiders could, surprise some people this year. It doesn't look that way at all. All right. Well, with that, we will get out of here, and, hell yeah. Football is back, man. I don't know. It was awesome to just have games on pretty much from Thursday on, all week. So that was great. We finally have actual games to talk about, which is a first for us on this podcast, which is also kind of cool. But we'll be back on Thursday, and obviously episode will come out before the Patriots-Eagles kickoff. And then, you'll find us at a regular cadence now on Thursdays and Mondays. So we will catch up on the week's happenings next Monday, catch you up on all the games. And yeah, thanks for listening, everybody.